Look, Chris, I want to go back to your live performance, whether it be when I see you in video or the live performance that I know you've done over the years. It's generally a trio, or what I would call the power trio. You on guitar, of course, lead guitar, bass, and a drummer.
Mhm.
You know, kind of reminiscent of Grand Funk Railroad, or Rush. Some of the iconic power trios. And I'm curious. I don't think I've ever asked you this question before. Why just the three instruments? Is it an economy of sound? Is it an economy of finances? Is it an economy of literally people on a stage? Why do you tend to just have three as opposed to four or five?
That's an excellent question, and I mean the answer is pretty much all three of those things.
Okay.
From a practical standpoint, um, pertaining to the types of shows that I would often get, where you're opening for so and so, Steve Vai or Joe
Right.
Satriani or Al Di Meola, any of those people. Very often you don't have very much stage room,
Right.
like
Right.
it's like about the size of a postage stamp,
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's that element for sure. And, frankly, just, energetically, the more people you get involved, the dynamic changes,
Sure.
sometimes for the better, uh,
Sure.
but, and musically speaking, just in terms of the space, the musical air, I do think that
Right.
there is, I do think there is something musically challenging about having um, to fill all those roles, by yourself.
Right.
I suppose it could also be limiting as well, So, like listen, man, in a perfect world, if if my relationship with Deko goes the way that I hope, and there's something in the way of tour support in the future, and
Yeah.
that was going to be a real thing. I would love a second guitar player to kind of fill things out when I can't really do everything by myself. And I would love a keyboard guy that maybe took care of some of the cool electronic elements
Yeah.
that are part of some of those songs. And I would love that because that would be really cool. But in the interest of simplicity and just keeping the dynamic, you know, the way it is.
Sure.
The rock trio thing, is what works best currently.
It never ceases to amaze me. Again, when you think of some of the quintessential iconic power trios, the amount of sound that could come out of three people is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think anything is lost. As far as having just three.
Yeah.
But yeah. Uh, anyway. So I want to learn a little bit more about your preferred gear. What
Hmm.
is your go-to guitar? What is your typical pedal setup? Please share with us
Hmm.
what you're using nowadays.
My primary electric guitar has been the same for a good number of years now, which is Terry McInturff guitars. He is a small independent builder in North Carolina, and I've been using his guitars for a long time. They're the most resonant, alive sounding, feeling electric guitars that I've
Is that
touched.
what's behind you there?
Yeah, yeah,
Great.
yeah.
It's
That's
beautiful. It's beautiful
yeah,
looking guitar. Oh yeah.
yeah. They're incredible. They're incredible. That's this Spellcaster. Excuse me, the Spitfire. They call that one. A
Gotcha.
Spellcaster is forthcoming, but they're remarkable guitars. I have several of them. Probably a little a little too many, I think, but they all have a purpose, though. They all have they all serve a purpose. But he there's something very I guess I could only really equate it to playing a Stradivarius. I think he's like the
Yeah.
Like he's like the electric guitar version of the Stradivarius violin. I mean, there's something very human, and you can feel the guy's DNA in the guitars, and it comes through in the way that they sound. And in fact, I'm pretty, you know, I would call Terry a friend at this point.
Yeah, sure.
He's built me a number of remarkable guitars. So, I've had many conversations with him where he talks about, banging on a piece of wood or clicking it or hitting it with a pencil. And he's able to tell what it's going to sound like at the end of that process. I don't think like that, I don't think like that at all. But it all translates, because when you hold his guitar in his hand, like I said, you kind of feel the guy's DNA in it. Pretty
Sure.
cool.
I
Oh, and
noticed.
sorry.
I was just going to say, before you go to pedals or amps, I noticed on your liner notes in numbers, you thank Ovation Guitars, and that's why I have my double neck Ovation front and center here.
I saw.
Yeah. I have always been a huge fan of Ovation, and I'll be honest with you, I just love the way they look. I think they are some of the coolest looking guitars. But tell me, please, about your relationship with Ovation. I don't remember you playing in Ovation when we were both in New York. Tell me.
Yeah, it's a fairly new relationship, and my obsession with those guitars is fairly new as well. Maybe 21 or something like that. In 2021, I think, is when I, became pretty intrigued by those.
Yeah.
Mainly, honestly, I wanted a 12 string, and that, it's pretty hard to look for a 12 string version of an acoustic guitar and have Ovation not be a thing. And so I got a 12 string, and then that sort of started my obsession. And I don't know if you can see, you can see.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. Now I do. Yeah.
Let me just go grab one. So this is my my 6th string.
Yeah.
So this is the Adamus line, which is all carbon graphite.
Yeah.
So there's very little wood in this, so the tuning is super stable, and they're just great. And they sound incredible. They play equally incredible, and I really dig them. And and if I'm being honest, Ovation became very special to me in a way that I didn't make the connection until fairly recently, which is my parents are huge Glenn Campbell fans.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
So when I was a kid, I thought there was 3 artists that made music in the whole world: Glenn Campbell, Neil Diamond, and John Denver. I thought those were that must be the only musicians, because that's the only music that I knew.
Right.
So I remember hearing Glenn Campbell all the time, and even looking at pictures of him, not knowing what I was likely looking at. Yeah. So when I discovered the Ovation thing and doing a little research, he had a huge amount to do with that company existing.
No question. Yeah.
From the pickups to the guitar I was just holding, the graphite and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was such a cool thing that I discovered a guitar kind of, fairly recently that had this connection to when I was so little and didn't really necessarily even put that together,
No question. So, no, that is very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think they sound great. I think they have a very unique voice, which I think is cool. And yes, to your point, they certainly look beautiful.
With Ovation, what I've found with players with Ovation is it's kind of, you love them or you hate them kind of thing. Traditionalists, purists, if you will, often don't like the idea that there's very little wood involved.
Yeah.
In an Ovation, like you said, it's graphite. What I understand of the original Ovation company, the founder came out of aviation. He was a helicopter engineer, and he took materials that he used in his day job, so to speak, with helicopters to develop the guitar. And yeah, they sound great. They look, I think, incredible. They're so unique. Whenever somebody's playing an Ovation, you know right away. Oh yeah, it's an Ovation.
Yeah,
It's so
from 30 rows back, you can tell.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
from a marketing standpoint, that's pretty amazing, really.
No question about it.
Yeah.
So tell us about sound, pedals, amps. Where do you fall with those items?
Well, my amplifier choices, they're somewhat minimal. And in fact, I don't have any pedals, which
Okay.
maybe kind of funny. I mean, I have a wah-wah pedal, and even that, in the grand scheme of things, is pretty recent,
Yeah.
relatively speaking. That's not to say I don't use processing. I just tend to use, like, rack effects and things like that.
Right.
Pedals are fun, and I could see it being a real, kind of fun gadgetry thing to get wrapped up in. And I have a lot of friends that have lots and lots and lots of pedals. But
Right.
but for me, like, you plug the guitar into the amplifier, and it loses a little something when there is
Something
a
in
lot of
between.
stuff in between,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
but then again, if you think about, like, the Edge from U2, whose, pedal board was like bigger than my dining room table, but
Right.
that's like his thing, like, it's his sound. That's the pedals are an essential aspect of it, and that's the power of the electric guitar. The electric guitar has evolved into that. And actually, somebody said that to me once. The electric guitar was not invented, it evolved. In fact, I've heard more than once that Leo Fender was horrified by what Jimi Hendrix did with the Fender Stratocaster. Horrified, that it was not like it was, he was offended by it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's totally true, but when you think about it, the guitar doesn't have a cello will always sound like a cello, and is incredibly beautiful as it is. That's probably what it was intended to sound like, and that's what it's going to sound like until humans don't exist anymore, right?
Right.
But
Right.
the electric guitar doesn't have that, a quintessential electric guitar sound, except for in the imagination of the player, And what a powerful, thing that is. When you put all, like, Tom Morello is incredible like that. He's created
Right.
these amazingly interesting tones with pedals and stuff, and um, but anyway, that's my my take on pedals. Is I tend to not not get too deep into them. And as far as my amplification, my whole, like, career pretty much only used two different amplifiers. I used a Soldano SL100 for a good number of years, and now I use a Splawn Quick Rod, which is basically, Scott Splawn is also an independent amp builder from North Carolina. There must be something in the water down there,
Yeah.
But Scott is, it's basically his take on a Marshall Plexi, which is arguably the quintessential rock guitar sound, is a Marshall Plexi, right? So
Very cool.
so his amp is kind of like his own little version of that, and I dig it. It's very organic feeling to me, and it gives you back what you put into it. It's not particularly colored at all. It's very tight and very focused, and very clean. Even like with the rock thing, it's still, to my ear, I perceive it as a very clean, gainy, percussive sound.
Sure. One thing, Chris, I was listening, actually listening and watching some of your videos in preparation for this earlier today. And one thing about your music is, as soon as you hit the first note, I know it's you.
Oh, cool.
You have, and that's something so special, right? I won't say it's easy to sound like someone else or easy to imitate someone else, but it certainly is unique, and I think difficult to develop your own unique tone and sound. And like I say, the moment you hit the first note, it's so it's so obvious that it's Chris Mahoney. So
Oh,
I commend you for that, and it's what makes you so unique, and I think it's just a matter of time now, with the help of Deko, that your career will go wherever you want it to go. And finally, I've
appreciate that so
said
much.
for so long, people just need to hear it, and
Mm,
finally, people are hearing it, and there's vehicles for people to hear it. So
mm.
I couldn't
Thank
be
you.
more thrilled for you, my friend.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
Chris, I've asked you this question a million times, and I know the answer. Or at least I know one of the answers. But
Okay.
I want you to share this with our audience. Who are some of your favorite players? Who are some of your favorite bands? Please.
Well, my favorite player of all time from day one to now is Steve Stevens.
Yeah.
From most successfully known for playing with Billy Idol, but he's done a
Sure.
lot of things, and that's amongst other reasons why he's always so inspiring to me. He always brings his thing to every situation, albeit that very different. Billy Idol is very different from Vince Neil and his flamenco playing, and
Yeah.
a Japanese pop artist whose name escapes me right now, and frankly, I couldn't really pronounce it anyway. So, um,
Yeah.
but Enrico Kasich from the Cars, he did a solo record, and Steve Stevens played on that. And Michael Jackson, right? Like he did a track with him. He always brings his thing, but always within the context of what he can bring to the song. The song is always key, and that's always been my thing. And for several reasons, that's why he inspires me so. So as far as players go, he's my player.
Yeah. Yeah.
And his flamenco playing, by the way, is absolutely is remarkable. You would
Yes.
never
Yes.
think that when you hear him that he plays rock and other things as well as he does. And again,
Yeah.
that's the complexity of guitar. If you think about some of the greatest guitar players that that Rolling Stone magazine would say, when I think they do the top 100 guitar players, whatever. When you think
Yeah.
about those guys, with respect to every single one of them, they pretty much do one thing. Think
Right.
about some of the
Right.
greatest, the most well-known players ever. They
Yeah.
have their thing, and that's really great. And with Steve Stevens, he just does all of it convincingly well.
Yeah.
I can't speak enough about his playing. But as far as like bands and stuff, we always spoke about Peter Gabriel. I'm a huge Peter Gabriel fan. I'm a huge fan of Nine Inch Nails, and Trent Reznor's a genius, a modern day Mozart. I mean, I really, as is Peter Gabriel. And Tool, like I said, I love Tool and Perfect
Yeah.
Circle, and some of my newest obsession maybe is Noah Gunderson. I love him. He's more of like a singer-songwriter kind of guy, but he's another guy that really uses space beautifully well. You should check him out if you haven't.
I haven't, and I will check him out for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. I love his work, and also he's a tremendous lyricist. And although as an instrumental artist, I don't write lyrics, but only because I don't do it well. So I always admire those that do it really, really well, and
Sure.
manage to say something unique in the process.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Um, and you and I went to a Billy Idol, Steve Stevens concert
Yeah, yeah, that was fun,
sometime
man.
back in New York
Yeah,
City. Yeah, that was
yeah,
very cool.
yeah.
And I think what speaks to Steve Stevens as well is the relationship with Billy Idol. Billy essentially does nothing without Steve Stevens, and
Yeah.
at this point, it's even an equal billing. It is Billy Idol and Steve Stevens.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the mutual respect is really beautiful between those two gentlemen for sure.
Yeah.
So Chris, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, how you and I met was at the New Windsor Music Academy in Orange County, New
Mhm.
York.
Yeah.
I had been taking lessons for quite some time with the owner and founder and a guitar virtuoso in his own right, Mike Benninger.
Mhm.
And I think Mike had finally gotten fed up with me and said,
Hey, throw you to
you know,
this guy for a while. See what
maybe,
happens.
maybe this guy can help you. And so where I'm going with this, my friend, is first of all, do you still teach? And if you do, what does that bring to you? What enjoyment? Is it a means to an end? I think for many musicians, to some degree, it's an income, and I'm sure
Mhm.
that that is true for you. But is it more than that, or is it just that?
No, it's significantly more than that. In fact, almost all my students at one point or another have probably heard the phrase, if my record ever does really well, or I win the lottery, I'll continue to teach but I'll do it for free.
Oh, very cool.
Because I love it, man. I love it. I started doing it not long after I started playing, and I'm very blessed to say I've had thousands of students in that time. And I suppose what it brings to me is, um, gosh, like it's like a musical version of immortality. Like
Yeah,
everybody has a story, right? Everyone has a story, and
yeah, yeah.
for me to be able to be a part of someone's musical story is huge, for me. Like when I first got my very first electric guitar, um, and I went to my very first teacher, this was, you know, life changing.
Sure.
And every other teacher that I've ever had has contributed to those things, and to some degree or another, some, on a very high level, and others on a smaller level, but nonetheless, they're all part of my musical story. And it's a huge honor to think to myself that I could be a part of that. It's amazing. I just love that. I love it.
Well, let me give you the other side of that from the recipient of your teaching, um, and this goes for Mike as well. I studied with you guys accumulatively for almost 7 years,
Mhm.
and this is no reflection on you guys, just the opposite. I have no basic talent. I I consider my guitar playing or my efforts of guitar playing much like playing golf. I don't play golf, but I have many friends who do, and they always tell me how frustrating the game of golf is. But every once in a while, you hit one long and you hit one straight, and it makes everything better. And that's how guitar playing is for me. Every once in a while, I hit that chord just right, and it sounds perfect, and it makes everything else better.
Mhm.
So guitar playing at some points has been very frustrating for me, because again, I truly have admittedly, I have no musical talent. I have to work at it. But
Mhm.
when I'm looking at my guitars from here, when I sit down, when I have a moment just to play a few chords or a simple tune, it brings me such joy. And I
Mhm.
could get
Yeah.
and I will get emotional about this because
Mhm.
it is you and Mike that gifted me with the ability to have that joy.
Mhm.
And it's something that you are some of the dearest people to me, and I can never thank you enough for
Yeah.
that gift.
Thank you, Jerry. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
I got to get
Mhm.
myself together now.
It's all right, man.
Uh, but yeah, I'm happy that for you it is something that you got as much out of it as your students,
Mhm.
because certainly this student can say to you, um, not only the gift of music, but the gift of your friendship. You know, you and Michael will be my friends for a lifetime, you know.
Mhm.
And again, where did that friendship start? Music. How beautiful is that? It's music
Yeah.
that started our friendship, and will
Mhm.
continue our friendship forever.
Right. Right.
Just I don't know if there's anything else like that in the world, you know. But anyway, so I'll get back on track, Chris.
Mhm.
Travis Stever, who is the lead guitar player, one of two lead guitar players for the band Coheed and Cambria, and
Right.
also now in the new band LS Dunes, which is really just becoming incredibly popular. He was a guest on a previous incarnation of this program, and the drummer for Coheed and Cambria is a young man named Josh Eppard, and
Oh yeah.
I seem to remember you doing something with Josh.
Yeah.
Refresh my memory with that.
Yeah. Well, that when I was involved doing those compilation records with Bohemian Productions or BHP, like I spoke of earlier,
Yeah.
they had this, kind of at the time, they had this plan to slowly kind of seep me into the music, buying population on these compilations, and then they were going to put out my appearance record at that time.
Right.
Which that relationship didn't materialize, unfortunately, the way it was intended. But as a part of those compilation records, we were just spacing out these recordings of these cover songs. So we had booked a session to do in Woodstock,
Yes.
that Misty Mountain Hop. The night before the session, the drummer that I had worked with, who I'd scheduled for that session, bailed.
Yeah.
So I called the producer and said, without a drummer, we got nothing. It's not happening.
Right.
So I said, you're going to have to call the studio, and we're going to have to cancel and tell them I'm so sorry. And well, it was terrible.
Right.
I was terrible.
Right.
So he calls me back a little while later, and he says, hey man, we don't have to cancel. He said, Josh Eppert from Coheed is actually on hiatus from the band right now, and
Yeah.
would love to do it. And I was like, it's cool, we're there, So I frankly, I had not known of him prior to that, and
Right.
so I met him in the live room that day and set up the drum set, and he was awesome. Like he really brought it, man. And he played great, and like I said, not having no knowledge of him at all, he shared with me how John Bonham was such a huge inspiration for him. So he was really
Yes.
excited to be part of that. And frankly, during some off time while we were sitting around waiting, which is a lot of times what you do in these sessions,
Sure.
he was sharing with me that he really enjoyed doing that because he said something really intriguing that day. He said, when you're on tour all the time, you get better at your set. That's it. There's very little time to practice and grow and things like that. Now, this is according to him.
Right.
He said
right.
maybe I got 5 minutes to kind of like really play like for a sound check. But so he was I think, if I'm based on what he shared with me at that
Yeah.
particular time, I think he felt a little boxed in and was really looking to branch out. So I mean, I have such a visual of him just killing it in the live room that day. Like
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
sounded throttling. Like he was really, and he plays open hand too. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was pretty cool. Like to see someone play with that kind of power, like open handed. What a drummer!
Yeah.
It was great. It was a great session, and it was the session that almost didn't happen, and that song exists only thanks to him. It would have been canceled otherwise.
Well, for what it's worth, I've discussed your work, and Travis has heard your work, and he always says what a fabulous player you are. So
Cool.
you're getting props from some very high places for
Cool.
sure.
It's good to know. Good to
Yeah.
know.